Previously, we established that it never goes well when someone tries to launch an invasion halfway around the world when they barely know what it is that they're actually invading. It seems like that should go without saying, but apparently it's a concept that requires regular review. Now today we'll establish what goes wrong when allies get out of hand and everyone gets into a cartoon dust cloud brawl with each other. This video will cover double world wars. No, not the world wars. Double world wars, that is, a series of two wars between two major powers that more or less involves all of the known or relevant world. So, well, yes, world wars, but not the world wars. It also includes the world wars, but okay, what the hell. Until further notice, I'm going to be mentally referring to them as World War X Ultimate Basement Thumb Wrestling Tag Team Competition Final Match Edition sponsored by Mountain Dew and Doritos. Screw it. So anyway, we'll be covering the Persian Wars, the Punic Wars, and then yes, the actual World Wars. Now you should definitely watch my last video on the military expedition model if you haven't already, but I'll go over it briefly again for clarity. The point of this series is to take tropes that reoccur throughout history and highlight their most notable instances. Now, this is not to say that history repeats itself verbatim, because it most certainly doesn't. Get that idea out of your head before I wash your brain out with soap. Obviously, things change over time, whether you fall more in line with
war. War never changes.
Or
war has changed.
There's something in Thucydides for you. Technology evolves, tactics adapt, and politics shift, but people and themes always stay the same. The mechanics of the First Punic War and World War I are apart from each other. One has phalanxes and shields, while the other has trenches and tanks. One lasted 23 years, while the other lasted 4. One war ended with the acquisition of war captives, and the other ended by setting them free. War is fundamentally waged differently now than it was then. Now that doesn't seem fair at all. But with those details out of the way, let's zoom out and look at what brings these events together. So the double world wars have 10 key traits. First, they're fought between two major powers. Second, the wars encompass a majority of the known or relevant world. I say relevant because nations are self-centered and exceptionally nearsighted. Third, these powers are more or less opposites in terms of government and or culture. Fourth, these powers in question fight each other somewhat less than enthusiastically because, fifth, the conflict started as a result of allies getting into a tussle and running to an adult to ask for help. Sixth, the loser suffers heavily as a result of the war, either economically or militarily. Seventh, the loser gets super mad at the winner, God knows why, and initiates a second war. Eighth, they almost win that war, but the winners win again because plot armor is the best armor. Ninth, world affairs come to be dictated by the winner for at least the next couple hundred years, because when you win two wars that big, you damn well better be going to Disney World afterwards. 10th, damn, 10? Really? That's impressive. Anyway, 10th. The leader of the aggressors in the Second War comes to be seen as one of history's greatest villains. With that said, let's go fight the Persians. The Ionians on the west coast of Anatolia decided that Persia could shove it, so they spent 6 years revolting against the Persian tyrants that ruled them. During that time, the Athenians thought it would be a great idea to help out their fellow Greeks in this battle for truth, justice, and the Ionian way, so they joined in and gave the Persians what for. Tragically, the Persians countered with some what 5 and stomped all over the revolt. Persia brokered peace amicably with the Ionian states, but remained more than miffed at Athens for intervening. Now, the world is a very small place at this time, as this actual map will show you. The world boiled down to Persia in the east, Greece in the west, and pretty much nothing important anywhere else, leaving aside China and India, of which the west was pretty much ignorant at this point. The Athenians and the Persians had different forms of government as well as different cultures. The thing is, Persia had no initial intention of doing anything bad to Athens at first, but now they did, so they did. If you've watched my video on the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars, you know how these wars play out. Athens, shockingly, wins the Battle of Marathon because they got a really lucky dice roll on their combat move that turn. Athens gets a burst of civic pride and rubs it in Persia's face, and Persia has to deal with the revolt in Egypt in the following years. In the long run, the attack was used by Alexander to justify the great yoinking of Persia in the late 300s BC, but that comes later. King Darius later dies, and his son Xerxes' Jimmies were properly rustled. The Persians come back with a stupid amount of people, power through Thermopylae, burn Athens down like it was a wooden statue at a stupid festival, only to be defeated royally at the Battle of Salamis and go home gently sobbing. After the follow-up infantry battle and Greek victory at Plataea the next year, Persia never expanded westward again. Afterwards, Athens got its century in the spotlight, and Greece enjoyed subsequent centuries indirectly in the spotlight because of the whole Alexander conquers everything thing. For more on that, go point your eyeballs at this shiny link. Finally, Xerxes, vengeful as he was towards the Athenians, did not enjoy favorable treatment from the PR death trap that is history. Granted, Athens kind of started all of this, but history is much like a second-grade playground scuffle. Most of the time, no one cares who started it. And if you look on your right, we'll see we're approaching our next destination, the Punic Wars. By the year 264 BC, when all of this started, in the Western Mediterranean, Rome ruled most everything non-barbaric above Sicily, and Carthage ruled the rest of it. Figure it out, you know how maps work. Since a little bit of time has passed since our last encounter, our new updated world map has Rome, Carthage, and a whole lot of nothing, and then some scattered Greek-themed monarchies in the east thanks to Alexander. But in the west, they don't really matter. I mean, it sounds mean, but west of Greece, it was all Carthage and Rome. That's it. Carthage was originally a colony of Phoenicia, which was way the hell over there. How did they get to Carthage? Well, little Timmy, I'll tell you. Boats. The Carthaginians had a huge seafaring trade network. The Discovery Channel show Deadliest Catch actually traces its programming back to the Phoenicians themselves. True story. Rome, however, didn't even have a fleet until the First Punic War. The point here is that they're different in that Rome loved land and Carthage loved going places by water. Now, the actual cause of the First War borders on ridiculous. Now, it is more complex than this, but basically some flighty Italian mercenaries turned pirates asked both Rome and Carthage to help them fight Syracuse. Carthage agreed because no one likes Sicily, let's be honest. Rome agreed because they bonded over their shared Italian love of The Godfather 2 and talking with their hands. Rome and Carthage didn't want war with each other, but when you both bring armies into one small space, it kinda sorta happens, you know? So the Romans won this war when they upgraded from the crappy amphibious cars from that episode of Top Gear to these bad boys. Carthage's economy took a hit from war reparations, and the General Hamilcar understandably swore revenge on Rome. On the pretense of invading Spain to get the silver to pay Rome back, the now dead Hamilcar's son Hannibal picked up the torch and then used it to set fire to all of Italy, casually. I flesh out the details of this war more over here in this video, but Rome wins despite having no logical reason to, and basically rules the world for another several hundred years. Rome vilified Hannibal the same way we vilify Hitler today, but overall he was actually a pretty decent guy and certainly the least villainous of the lot today. Still a little bit weird to think that he traveled through time to eat all those people. Finally, we jump about 2,000 years later to Sarajevo in 1914, where nothing important or world-changing is going to happen. Oh, come on. Fine. The Austrian Archduke Ferdinand, freshly assassinated, triggered, okay, fine, many less than pleasant feelings between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. At the turn of the century, everyone had an ally. So Austria-Hungary went to Germany and the Ottomans, and Serbia went to France, England, and Russia. In this case, the major powers are alliances, and I'll let the world part of World War I be self-explanatory. The two alliances didn't have a lot of open beef with each other, but according to the Inigo Montoya principle of you mess with my guy, I mess with you, the allies and the Central Powers found themselves at war when they really had no inherent reason to be. Fast forward through all that fighting nonsense and we get to the Treaty of Versailles, in which the Germans get absolutely shafted by the Allies and suffer a huge economic downturn as a result. Here's where point 3 comes in. While before the First World War most of Europe had some combination of parliament and monarchy, the European governments in the Second World War were night and day between allied republics and Axis dictatorships, with Russia as the turncoat wildcard in the middle. So a decade after Versailles, Charlie Chaplin, I think, who was Germany's dictator, wanted some good old-fashioned revenge, so he declared war, as you do. And at first it worked out pretty well for him, seeing as he basically owned Europe and repeatedly bombed London. However, freedom never sleeps, and the Americans came to take names, chew bubblegum, and kick ass, and so they did. America, having done basically 75% of the work on that group project, got the best grade, and had the luxury of being the dominant world power from the end of the war up to today, and for at least another 5 or so weeks into the future. For the last point, let it suffice to say that for just about everyone alive today, hopefully, Hitler is the definitive historical villain. These stories are lessons in not being gloating winners or sore losers, or war criminal. Don't be that either. I mean, you really shouldn't need me to tell you that, but anyway, a takeaway here is that even though the means by which we all do things can change quite drastically with time and technology, the themes that underlie our motives and actions haven't really upgraded since the Garden of Eden software update way back in the 4000s BC. Stay tuned to next time when we cover just what goes wrong when political arguments get a slight bit heated.